senators, and representatives, I have the distinguished honor of presenting the President of the United States.
The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
The bombing of Pearl Harbor and the entrance of the U.S. into the war, a lot of people saw that as a perfect opportunity to get rid of persons of Japanese ancestry.
My parents, they were all around the radio listening. They weren't saying very much. My mother was crying, my father was just disgusted. All that work that my parents did to that nursery and so forth, what's going to happen? A few days later, the police came down there and confiscated all the flashlights and cameras. They confiscated everything that they thought that we would use for signal.
The Secret Service and the FBI had swept into the Japanese American community and had arrested any community leader, any teacher, any civic organization head of any importance in that community.
They come at you with a bayonet in your back and say you're going to move into a horse stall. You do.
On February 19, 1942, FDR signed Executive Order 9066. 9066 put the Secretary of War and his commanders in charge of deciding where the military zones would be and who should be removed. It gave the military power over the Attorney General to make these decisions without any hearings or due process.
I went to San Francisco, first chance I had, and I talked to this doctor. I just told him that, you know, I've been harassed so much being an Asian that I would like to look more Caucasian. He just slit my eyes, I guess, and took some of the skin off or something on both of my eyes. That was it. Then the police came, and they looked around and looked at me and said, "Did you see any short Japanese person around here, Asian?" I said, "No." He looked at me and says, "Well, let me see your identification." By that time, the two MPs came, the military, and he says, "We have to take you to the city hall."
When the evacuation began on March 22, 1942, newsreels announced its start with a tone wavering between fear and contempt. This one, called Out They Go, never mentions that 2/3 of the evacuees were American citizens, but refers to them by a word we'd never use today.
Japs evacuate vital West Coast areas for the national security. At Los Angeles, 36,000 Japs see the handwriting on the wall and sell out their goods before their voluntary departure.
The evacuation wasn't voluntary, it was the law. And before it even began came mayhem, theft, and loss. People were only allowed to take to the camps what they could carry on their backs. They had to make arrangements to store or get rid of everything else they owned on short notice. The lucky ones got 2 weeks, some only a few days.
Most Japanese Americans had to leave their properties behind. There's lots of incidents when, they were cheated or they weren't given full value for their property. There were a lot of fire sales that happened, so they had tremendous losses.
A congressional report 40 years later detailed some of the loss. One proprietor had to sell her 26-room hotel for only $500. Refrigerators were extorted for $5 or less. One man poured gasoline on his house, determined to burn it down rather than leave it behind. His wife stopped him, saying, "We are civilized people, not savages."